There we go.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Addiction Hope Google Hangout. We're so glad you could join us tonight, and we're so excited to have as our featured guest this evening, Mr. Brian Cuban. Welcome, Brian. We're so glad that you can join us and just really appreciate your time being here to talk with us tonight.
I'm honored to be back. It's always a true pleasure to be on the air with you guys.
Thank you. We so love having you. And, we have such a great topic tonight, which is all about living life in sobriety. And I think that's something that applies to countless people who may be watching tonight. So thank you for coming to speak with us about this really important topic.
My pleasure.
But before we get started, there may be some people who are watching who are not as familiar with you and what you're doing. You're an incredible advocate in the mental health world and community. And you're also a best-selling author and a renowned speaker. But can you just give us a little bit of a background about yourself and a little bit about what you're doing now at this point?
Sure. Let's talk about let me give you the important bullet points here. I am a person in long-term recovery. Mm-hmm. I have been sober since April 8th, 2007. I'm in recovery from alcohol and cocaine addiction. I am also in recovery from both anorexia and bulimia. Mm-hmm. I am a lawyer by trade. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have two brothers, my younger brother, Mark. A lot of people know my older brother, Mark. My younger brother Jeff, people know more from Shark Tank and such. Yeah. And I speak at colleges and events around the country about recovering from both eating disorders and addiction and how I maintain my sobriety from both eating disorders and addiction.
Thank you for sharing that. And we've been so grateful to have your support on both Addiction Hope and then our sister site, Eating Disorder Hope, because you have an incredible testimony of recovery from both an eating disorder and addiction, like you said. So as we get into our topic, living life in sobriety, and I think a lot of people who are struggling with addiction may not even be able to fathom what a life in sobriety is like, especially if you're in the throes of addiction. And if it's a year-long addiction, it's hard to imagine ever coming out of that. Can you tell us more about your experience, specifically with your addiction to drugs and alcohol?
Absolutely. I was an alcoholic by the time I was a sophomore at Penn State University, 21 years old. I discovered alcohol and began to drink heavily. And before I knew it, boom, I was an alcoholic. It's funny when I speak, I'll get a kid go, every college I speak at, one kid will go, well, you're not an alcoholic till you graduate. No, I was an alcoholic and I had not yet graduated. Mm-hmm. And I was going through it back in a time when there really weren't a lot of treatment options. We're back in early 1980s. There weren't treatment centers. We didn't have the media. You didn't have the internet. So it really, unless you knew somebody who had gone to treatment, who was in 12-step, you really were, living your life just with your addiction. I remember when I was a sophomore at Penn State, walking into a hamburger joint. I think I was drunk at the time, and I came across this rack of pamphlets that the 12-step groups put out. And I remember going through there's this pamphlet called the 20 Questions. If you answer this many questions, you might be an alcoholic. And I'm like, yes, 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 yes. Crumple it up, make a 2-point shot. I'm just a college student. That was about as close as I ever came to self-awareness as an alcoholic until I went into recovery. And I discovered cocaine in 1987 in Dallas, in a bathroom in Dallas, Texas. And it was something that for 15 seconds gave me a feeling that I had never experienced before. Suddenly I loved myself. Suddenly I felt like I was loved. I felt like I was accepted. I felt like I was attractive. And I was a person who had a terrible self-image from what's called Body Dysmorphic Disorder.
Right.
I thought I saw a monster every time I looked in the mirror. But cocaine, for that 15-second high, boom, I was great. I looked in the mirror and said, that guy's cool. But of course, that 15 seconds wears off.
Right.
Then comes the depression. Then comes the shame. And you have to have that 15 seconds over and over and over again. I became a drug addict the very first time I used cocaine in that bathroom in Dallas, Texas. Anyone who thinks you cannot become addicted to drugs the very first time is wrong. Anyone who tells somebody that is lying. They need to talk to me. I was a drug addict the very first line of cocaine I did. And it wasn't and I'm not saying it was a biological process like we get with dependence, with opiates. It was a psychological addiction. I became addicted to that. I was instantly addicted to that feeling of acceptance and love and the euphoria, the dopamine in the brain going nuts. You know, I'm not saying nuts, but the dopamine in the going haywire. And I had to have that feeling, and it was a psychological addiction. And I eventually did develop a physical dependence to cocaine and went through terrible withdrawal, but it was a step towards my journey into recovery. So that's how I got there. And I was an alcoholic and drug addict for many years, and I did cocaine in the bathroom of my law firm. I basically became not functional as an attorney. Spent almost every dime I had on alcohol and drugs. Lost my clients. Dangerously close to losing my family. And no longer could even call myself a lawyer. I was an addict. My identity as a lawyer ceased to exist to the extent it did exist before that. And that's how cocaine took me down. Took me down into being broke, took me down into being just depressed every day, took me down into, along with alcoholism and the body dysmorphic disorder, took me into a suicidal state, took me into 2 trips to a psychiatric facility, took me into an alcohol-induced blackout before I finally went into recovery. It was a journey, and it was not a pleasant journey. But it was a journey that brought me here, talking to you.
Yeah, and we just so appreciate your transparency and you being so genuine about your own story and recovery. And I think that's what gives so many people hope, is knowing, you know, I might be in this situation, but I can move towards recovery.
Absolutely. Everyone takes a different step, and people take steps backwards. I relapsed a zillion times. I cannot even count all the times after a weekend all-nighter, weekend binger, where I said, that's it, I'm done. And that lasted for 3 days, a week, 2 weeks. Then I had then the depression of seeing that monster in the mirror, of feeling unloved, of just this bottomless pit of depression. The only way I knew to pull myself out of it was alcohol and drugs.
And you spoke on so many good points. And one thing you mentioned was how, you know, you were not functioning, but you were carrying on kind of like the normal day-to-day things. And I think a lot of people who are struggling with addiction kind of get by and are holding jobs. And
I mean, a lot of people can maintain what we call high functioning, you know, but eventually the two worlds collide. You're high functioning. I had my lawyer world and I had my druggie world. The all night, you know, bingers with the people who just did cocaine, and people stayed up all night. Generally, people half my age, and because they did that, and that's you know, those were the groups that I wanted to be with, because I felt accepted in those groups. No one judged me for doing those things. But you do enough of those, and the two worlds come together, and eventually they collide. I have a saying that no addict dies high functioning if they don't go into recovery.
That's such a good point. And I think that's one of the hardest things about addiction. I don't know if you would agree with this, but there's so much denial, you know, about the severity of it, and it just kind of perpetuates and keeps going.
Absolutely. I'll tell you a story. When I became suicidal in 2005, it was very close, and my brothers came into my house, Mark and Jeff, and I had a weapon on my nightstand. They took me kicking and screaming down to Green Oak Psychiatric Facility in Dallas. I mean, I did not want to go. I didn't want them in my house. I was not an addict. They were in the car, and I'm yelling, "Leave me alone, take me home." I didn't think I was an addict. In my world, they were invading my space. They were invading the safe space of addiction, of day-to-day survival I had created for myself, this bubble. And the thought of being pulled from that, even by people who love me, who were trying to save me, was terrifying to me. And the terror manifested itself as anger. And that anger was towards the people who loved me the most.
Wow, that's very powerful to hear that. And what actually made you want to get treatment? I mean, when did you get to the point where you decided, hey, I need to do this?
I had met a girl in 2006, and we started dating, and she moved in with me, and she went away, and I hid all of this from her. I had a PhD in hiding my eating disorder, my drugs, and my alcohol. But when she finally moved in, that became tougher, and she went away for a weekend, and during that weekend, I had a drug and alcohol-induced blackout and Valium as well. 2 days passed, and next thing I know, she's standing over my bed, and there's drugs everywhere. There's cocaine everywhere. That was kind of the final thing. And we went back down to Green Oak Psychiatric Facility, and I'm thinking she's gone. I'd go too. She actually stood by me. She saw something in me, and we recently got engaged, and we've been together over 9 years. We're actually over 10 years now. She'll kill me if she heard me say 9 years. So she saw something in me, and she took me down to Green Oaks again. And so I'm standing in the parking lot of Green Oaks, and I'm thinking, well, she's gone. And I thought about two other things. I thought about, one, there wouldn't be a third trip back there. I'd be dead. And two, I felt that I had reached the point, just instinctively, where this love, enablement, and recovery had finally come together in my family, and they had had enough. They weren't going to enable me, and they still love me, but if I wasn't going to take at least one little step into recovery, they didn't want to be around me. I had already distanced from them. I have nieces and nephews I wasn't seeing. I wasn't going to functions, and they had just had enough. Family, we hope, loves you unconditionally. I know not everyone has that, but we hope you do. But there are going to be limits on their ability to watch you destroy yourself, no matter how much they love you.
Right.
Because you have to take charge of your own recovery. Family can't save you. My brothers tried to save me when they took me down to Green Oaks. I remember them driving me back from Green Oaks because I refused to go to rehab. And driving me back, and they say, well, just stay in your house for 2 weeks. We'll take your car keys. I call that the Cuban rehab. Because they didn't know any better. They didn't know. They didn't know about addiction. And my other thought was, that's fine. My cocaine dealer delivers. So no problem. But finally in that parking lot, I realized that they had had enough. My father knew nothing about this for a lot of reasons. I had a difficult relationship with my mom at that time, although we have reconciled and have a wonderful relationship now. And I thought about decades before, growing up, where my father, he just turned 90. He's a veteran of World War II, a veteran of the Korean War.
Wow. Back
in the 70s, when I was tweens, and Mark, Jeff, and I, he'd say, Mark, Jeff, Brian, he'd say, wives may come and go. Well, yeah, I've had 3 failed marriages. One more, I get a free set of steak knives. But that's what happens in addiction, right? Relationships fail.
Yeah.
He goes, wives may come and go, girlfriends may come and go, and we hope they don't. But when push comes to shove, all you have is each other. So no matter where you go in life, no matter what happens, you call your brother every week and you tell your brother you love him. You ask your brother how he's doing. And I thought about that. And I couldn't lose the gift of family that my father had given me. The bond of brothers. My father was the middle of 3 boys. Like
you, yeah.
And I couldn't lose that. I was unwilling to lose that. And that was enough. And if you want to know how that bond has stayed, all these decades later, Mark, Jeff, my father, and I live walking distance from each other.
Oh my goodness.
1,200 miles from where we grew up decades later. That is the bond my father gave us.
Absolutely.
I couldn't lose that.
Yeah, and I'm sure just the thought of losing them was frightening, you know, being in addiction.
Yes. You know what? My battery, for some reason, can I step away? My battery's going and I have it plugged in. I'm sorry about this.
No, take your time. We are totally fine here.
For some reason, this is not plugged in.
You're fine. That's technology for you, huh?
Well, I feel terrible because it's...
No, don't worry.
Yeah, hopefully you can edit this part out. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that.
No, you are totally fine. Thank you.
There we go. Sorry, everybody. It was plugged in, but the battery was draining. I don't know what's up.
Oh, well, thanks for coming back with us.
So in any event, picking back up with that, standing in that parking lot of Green Oaks, thinking about those things, I decided that it was time to start a new journey. It was time to start a journey of recovery because I wanted to live and I didn't want to lose my family. So the next day, this was April 8th, 2007, I walked into my shrink's office. And I had been lying to him for two years. I'd been seeing him. And people say, well, why would you lie to your shrink? You're paying the guy? Well, shame knows no hourly rate, right?
Exactly.
So I was ashamed. And I told him about the addiction and the alcohol and the cocaine. I had been just telling him I was depressed because all my failed marriages, getting my antidepressants, why did my marriage fail, but never getting open about all these things that I was doing.
Right.
So he looks at me and he goes, Brian, we have a problem. I go, what? Well, yeah, we have a problem. He goes, we have a lot of things we have to work on, but you're a freaking addict. We can't work, and you're an alcoholic. We can't work on all these things, tear back the layers of your life until you get sober.
Exactly.
He says to me, there's a 12-step meeting going on right next door. Just go, just pick up and go. And I'm sorry, I'm going into a monologue. Do you want to go back to questions?
No, this is perfect. You're hitting all our questions anyway. So,
so he says, just pick up and go. Go over to this 12-step meeting. I'm not going to 12-step meeting. Those are sterno bums. I see them. They're homeless people. I see them smoking cigarettes out there. I don't smoke. I'm a lawyer. He looks at me and goes, Brian, you may have a law degree, but you're not a lawyer. You're an addict. Okay. Well, I still don't want to go to 12 steps. Just go. We'll talk about rehab if that doesn't work. But we'll talk about treatment, inpatient treatment. But let's try this. I said, but I'll be ashamed. I'll know people. You know, no lawyers don't go to 12 step. And when I walked in there, half of them were lawyers.
oh,
So after milling around the door to 12 step for about a half hour, doing a couple fake walks down the hallway just to see if I knew anyone in there, I finally walked through the doors April 8, 2007, and picked up my desire chip. And since then, I have not taken a drink or done cocaine.
wow.
And I had my 9th year, April, of this year, and I consider myself now a person in long-term recovery.
Absolutely.
And living my life in sobriety.
That is so
That's my story.
Yeah, and it's just so encouraging and beautiful to hear, after everything that you had been through and all those low points, that you got to that place where you committed to sobriety. And I think a lot of people who are struggling with addiction just don't know how do they take that first step, and what is your encouragement to someone?
The first step is scary. I mean, my job, when I speak, my job is not to pump sunshine into people.
Right.
The first step is scary. Detox isn't fun. But let me tell you something. Sobriety is fun. Sobriety is great. I have accomplished more sober than I did in all the years leading up to that point.
Sure.
Of course you're going to be scared. There's a saying, there is no courage without fear. Of course you're going to be scared. And what are your options? Don't get caught up in the future. Don't get caught up in this is what sobriety is supposed to look like. This is what a quote-unquote addict looks like. Don't get caught up on that. Get caught up in where you are at the moment. Focus on that in just the first little step. And there are options. And remember, if that first step isn't for you, there are other options. This isn't 40 years ago, when all there was 12-step.
Right.
Okay. There are the 12-step. I got sober in 12-step, but I don't advocate 12-step. I just say that I got sober there.
Exactly.
But the good thing about 12-step is it's free. Okay. And it's free, and there are like-minded people there. For me, that was good. Are there things I don't like about 12-step? Absolutely. I'm not a religious person. And I believe no matter what people tell you, 12-step is a religious-based program. But for me, I didn't care because I liked all the people in there.
Right.
So connections. Get with people who are not doing drugs and drinking. Changing connections is key in any sobriety. That first little step. That was my first step after 12-step and it was hard, changing those connections. No longer hanging out with the drug dealers, no longer hanging out with the all-night party bingers. Getting over the fear that what's going on out there? I have to be part of that or I'll be alone forever. It's not true. And every addict, I won't say every addict, but I think most addicts go through that. The fear of a change of lifestyle. I'll be alone forever.
Absolutely.
And it's not true. And it's not about hanging out with people on 12-step. I don't. I grew to be okay with myself. I grew to realize I'm enough. And for me, that meant realizing, you know what? I'm not a guy who has to go out all the time. I'm not a guy that needs to do this or do that. I have my dogs, I have this. And that's good for me. And that's part of my sobriety. I have mindfulness. I'm always aware of, I always try to take stock of where I am in sobriety because I know that there are always triggers out there.
Absolutely. And, you've said so many great things from your own story. And one thing you mentioned was how drugs and alcohol really helped you as you were coping with body dysmorphic disorder. And I think a lot of individuals who may be dealing with an addiction are also dealing with depression or anxiety. Absolutely. And so, they're self-medicating. So how would you encourage an individual like that?
Here's the question I always ask. I deal with this with a lot of young adults when I speak to colleges, and especially comes up in I don't want to get into the debate, but especially comes up with marijuana.
Right.
Okay? Or self-medicating with marijuana, whether it's legal or illegal, whatever. Right. They'll say to me, well, it's legal. It's not, you can't overdose on it. You can't become addicted to it. And let's put all that aside. You can become addicted, just not physically dependent.
Exactly.
But I say, what feeling are you trying not to feel? Where is that feeling coming from? You are medicating, you are putting Band-Aids on a feeling. And the hardest part for me was not stopping the cocaine. It was not stopping drinking. I think most people can white knuckle for a short or a semi-long period of time, and just stop, and just go through that. The hardest part was dealing with how I got there. The hardest part was dealing with a child who was bullied, a child who had a terrible relationship with his mother, a child who felt unloved. And I don't blame my parents for that. Parents don't cause addiction. Parents don't cause eating disorders. What feeling are you trying to hide, and why is the toughest question in addiction? And it's not just, and I'm not talking about, say, opiate addiction. That's a different animal where you become addicted because you had an injury. Let's put that aside, something like that. Right. I'm talking about almost recreational type addiction, where all of a sudden you're an addict. You're using for these reasons. It always comes back to, from my standpoint, what don't you want to feel? And why don't you want to feel it? Everyone is going to have to face that. And it's how you face it that matters. How do we face it? Well, okay, we have 12-step. We have counseling. I've been seeing a shrink for over a decade. I think everyone should be in therapy.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
It's about finding someone you trust to open up and figuring out why you feel that way. Why are you depressed? What have you gone through that you don't want to face? That is hard. And that caused the failure to the not wanting to face that is what many times sends people in a relapse. Or causes them to not even attempt sobriety.
Right.
So my message is, it's okay. No one ever died from a feeling.
Absolutely. That's such a good point.
no one, they haven't. No one dies from feelings. They hurt. Feelings hurt. You have trauma. You have loss. You've been sexually abused. You've been physically abused. Facing those feelings hurt, but you don't die from those feelings. But you can move forward from those feelings.
Absolutely. And I love how you touched on how the recovery journey is individual. Like what worked for you might not necessarily work for someone else.
Absolutely. You may not want to go to 12-step. Don't go. If you don't want to go, don't go. But there are other, even for connection type self-help groups. There's Smart Recovery. There are all kinds of other self-help groups out there if that's your thing. There's all kinds of treatment available that wasn't available when I was going through it. Every person is different. Every person's path has to be determined by their unique genetic makeup and environmental factors.
Absolutely. And Brian, can you just tell us what has been the best thing about being sober and living a life of sobriety, just as encouragement to people who are watching and maybe feeling like, maybe this is as good as it gets, but
I have a family
on the other side.
I have a family and I have a fiance, and I am able to love and be loved now.
It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's just incredible to hear the hope that has come from your own journey. And I know that's encouraging. And
I know you may not see that hope when you're in the middle of it.
Right.
But again, it all starts with one step. How are you going to take that step? What motivates you? What can motivate you just to take that first step you don't have to look all into the future. Just look there. Just look right here and take that.
Well, that is just such wonderful encouragement. And we just so appreciate you being so open and taking the time to share your incredible testimony with us tonight. So thank you again, Brian.
My pleasure. Can I tout my new book?
Yes. And we were going to say, I know, I wish we could just continue speaking, but before we let you go, can you please tell us about your new book that's coming out and where we can find it and find out more information?
Sure. I'm working on my second book. It is called The Addictive Lawyer, Tales of the Bar, Booze, Blow, and Redemption. So it's going to be my story in trying to function as a law student at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law, and then as an alcoholic, and then as a lawyer, as an alcoholic and an addict, and what that meant to me, what that did to me, how I was able to reshape my career goals. And it not only was my story, but unlike Shattered Image, my first book, this will have stories of other law students and other lawyers, as well as experts in the field. It will be ready in 2017. I'm still working on it, but stay tuned.
Wonderful. And where can we find out more about you? Can you tell us your website and just information about your book?
www.briancuban.com, where I post excerpts from The Addictive Lawyer and I write on mental health topics. On Facebook, you could also go to the Addictive Lawyer Facebook page.
Great. And then you also guest blog for Psych Central too, is that right?
I do. I guest blog for Psych Central. That is called Cubanity. So if you just Google Cubanity and Psych Central. And then I'm also rappelling off Reunion Tower in Dallas this weekend for Shatterproof.
Tell us about that in closing.
Well, Shatterproof is a wonderful organization that promotes addiction awareness, legislation, and recovery. And I will be rappelling for the first time, and I'm terrified of heights, down, I believe it's 57 stories, Reunion Tower in Dallas this Saturday. And we've raised over $20,000. My personal team has raised over $20,000 to fight addiction. So I'm excited to do that Saturday afternoon.
Oh my goodness. Well, we'll definitely be looking for that on your Twitter and Facebook.
Yes. Yes, it's going to be live streamed on my Facebook page, and it'll be GoPro'd, so it'll be good.
Oh, wonderful. We can't wait to see it. Well, thank you so much again for joining us and for sharing your incredible story. And we just congratulate you on all the wonderful things you have going on.
Thank you so much. And of course, I support you all, and I'll come back anytime.
Thank you so much, Brian. Well, and of course, to all our viewers tonight, please stay tuned for our upcoming Google Hangouts, and we'll also be promoting Brian's new book when it comes out through Addiction Hope. So stay tuned for that. And thank you again, Brian. Hope to see you soon.
My apologies, everyone, for the technical glitch.
Oh, don't worry. We were just happy to have you. So have a good night. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
bye.